Good evening. Our top story tonight, the top quarterback spots in the NFL draft coming up are really starting to firm up now that we're able to track a lot of the team visits, and especially as the pro days continue to commence this week and the next few. We're really starting to not even really have to sift through rumors. We're getting reports where we know exactly who's interested in who. We know certain teams who may not be interested in their starters anymore, who are looking to move on from them. And we can now start to really project that we may have one of I guess it would be the first time ever where we have four quarterbacks taken in the top four picks. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about there's a lot of fantasy players who we just need to give a little bit more time of day. And some of the news within the last 48 hours has dictated us needing to have a conversation about the Gus Edwards of the world, the Devin Singletaries of the world. So we're going to talk all that and more on Player Profiler today. All right, so our top story is about the top of the NFL draft. We all know Caleb Williams is going to the Bears. Newsflash, that's happening. So let's just put that aside because that is happening. Caleb Williams is going to the Bears. They've set him up actually to have a decent amount of rookie year success, and there's really not too much discussion. The number one pick is not up for grabs. They are taking Caleb Williams. Now, it does also now seem that the number two pick is locked in. They're going to be taking Jaden Daniels. So here's what I know. The Commanders are getting a million calls about trading the number two overall pick. There's a lot of teams who are trying to get up there and get that pick. I know, for instance, like the Giants have been rumored to be one of those teams who are trying to get Jaden Daniels in particular. Because I do think now that we've started to get closer and closer to the draft, Caleb is one, Jaden Daniels is two, and we're starting to see a pretty big gap emerge after that between him and Drake May or JJ McCarthy or whoever you want to put at three is Drake May. But like there is a pretty decent gap forming there. And the Commanders they're getting more calls than Drake and J. Cole got this week after Kendrick dissed them. They are getting calls out the yin-yang. But Dan Quinn came out and said it would take a lot for the Commanders to move off that pick. And they're basically doing their due diligence by taking these calls. But unless they're offering the earth and the moon, they're not moving off that pick. And they're going to get their franchise quarterback in Jaden Daniels. He also made it very clear, is like, I would say it'd be fair to envision we're taking a quarterback. So there's no secret. They're taking a quarterback. They're taking the second best quarterback, and that is going to be Jaden Daniels. So I think we all need to start mentally processing that. And I think it's turning into a much better spot than I initially envisioned when they brought on Dan Quinn. I'm not going to lie. I may have been one of those guys who's super tainted by the way that they lost against Green Bay. And I do think that there's going to be some concerns if this team over the next few years turns into a playoff team and what's going to happen when they're in big games. But they've done everything you could do to bring in a rookie quarterback. They've signed 20 veterans, and they have so much leadership like Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner. They brought in, I think, nearly like 11 starters just off the rip. So they're going to have a significantly better team. Their defense has a lot of starters added. Their offensive line, generally speaking, has gotten better. They need to address the left tackle. But assuming they do that via the draft or assuming they do that in free agency still, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be set up for a ton of success. I keep wanting to say Jaden Williams because Caleb Williams. So Jaden Daniels, he's going to be set up with a ton of success. I don't know why we're not really thinking about him as what Anthony Richardson was last year, but for like a full season. Like in fantasy, I do think we need to start thinking like that could be his reality. He's going to be a run dominant player. I do think hopefully maybe he should talk to Anthony Richardson now, but like he needs to work on getting down. But part of his game is running the football. So I do think we're going to see an amazing running show from him out of the gate. He is also much more developed of a passer than a lot of quarterbacks coming out who people would say, quote unquote, a run first. I don't think he's a run first quarterback, but he does a good job going through his progressions. Now, granted, his wide receiver is going to be taken in the top 5 probably of the draft or top 6. But he still was doing a great job, has been incredibly accurate through his career. And he's a fifth-year senior, so he's not like a young pup. Like he's relatively mature. And I think that if he's brought into a good team, and again, you make sure that you protect him, he can have a lights out fantasy season. And that is a guy who may creep into the top 12 of our fantasy rankings before it's all said and done this upcoming season. But I do think we need to consider that. Now, let's talk about some of the other fantasy impacts really quick before we move to the next quarterback. I do think that this is not great for Austin Eckler. I think the impact of Austin Eckler will be great for Jaden Daniels, but I don't think vice versa. Obviously, like Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator, so take what I'm about to tell you with a grain of salt. But Jaden Daniels just does not check down to his running backs that much. I think like usually if he's thinking to check down, he's probably going to take off. And so if he's not able to hit his guys down the field, intermediate, instead of checking down to Austin Eckler, he may just take off and run. And I do worry about a player like that. At LSU over the last 2 years, I believe, so it was under 12% to their running backs, like the receptions, and then under 14.5% the year before that. Like he's just not a guy who loves to check down to his running backs, but he loves to target his number one dudes. So we all know Malik Neighbors. He's going to go in the top 6 in the NFL draft at the least. Amazing, top-end talented receiver, literally does everything well. If Marvin Harrison Jr. was not in this draft, he would be the clear number one, and there's no question. But I think that Terry McLaurin has the ability to be Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors in year one. Malik Neighbors got over a 31% target share during his time at LSU. And with what's happening with Washington, I can easily see a situation where Terry McLaurin demands a much higher target share than we've typically seen. Now, Terry McLaurin in particular, he's coming off of a down year this past year. He never scores touchdowns, but happened to score fewer touchdowns than normal. And he was not getting targeted a lot. Well, he was getting targeted a lot because the team was throwing, but poor quality targets. The team was just not a good team. Sam Howell, he was struggling a lot. I do think Jaden Daniels could come in there and just be a marked improvement from a quarterback target quality standpoint. Now Curtis Samuel's out of the picture. He's on Buffalo. He's been stealing touchdowns from us in fantasy for a long time. That's no longer an issue. Like I've already told you, Jaden Daniels isn't really the type to check down to his running back. And so I do think we're going to see a yards per reception jump up because we saw that dip for Terry McLaurin. We're going to see his touchdowns. Hopefully he just needs to get you 7+. And we're going to see his total yardage really expand as well. And so with all of that, I do think we're not considering Terry McLaurin as like a top 20 receiver, and we should be at least talking about it. All the opportunity is going to be there. There's going to be touchdown opportunity that's not been there in a while. I do think that this is a situation where we need to like take a step back and really appreciate it. So that's just a preview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a lot more of that. I'm going to talk about the rest of the quarterbacks at the top of the NFL draft, but also some of those fantasy players that we've just been forgetting to talk about or not putting a focus on. But we're going to hear a little bit more from the Podfather and Dynasty Deluxe, and we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by PlayerProfiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty Guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our Rookie Guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. So it's a great deal.
It is a great deal, and I think you need to make sure you go to Player Profiler and learn more about all the things that we have to offer. Obviously, you can go to the App Store and get that app, but there's a ton of things that are available, so make sure you guys tap in. Make sure you guys, I always need to say this, make sure you guys subscribe, like this video. Make sure you follow Player Profiler News as well as Player Profiler on the main YouTube and all the places that you're able to view this. We do this for you guys, so make sure you guys are tapped in. Now, let's move on to the next part of today's show. So we're going to continue to talk about these quarterbacks at the top of the draft. So the Patriots, shocker, are going to go to Jaden Daniels Pro Day. Like I just said, I don't think there's any possibility they're going to get him because the Commanders are going to take him at 2. But they also plan to check out Drake May at UNC at his pro day coming up. And they've already been at JJ McCarthy's, Caleb Williams. Like, they're going to all the top pro days. So I do think the New England Patriots are taking a quarterback. There's a lot of people who really want them to go like the route of Marvin Harrison Jr. because they're definitely going to be able to get him at 3, or trade back and do the same. Or you go so you go Marvin Harrison Jr. with your first pick that you have in the first round, and then you either trade back into the first round or take it early in the second round, a Bo Nix, a Michael Penix if he falls, etc., as your starting quarterback. And while that, in theory, like I like that, I think that is a great opportunity to get some great value. The upside of Drake May, who I think they are going to pick, versus the other guys is a night and day difference. He is not a perfect prospect. Definitely, you could see some areas for improvement, especially like pocket presence, accuracy, things like that. The arm talent is there. The toughness is there. I can't even say he's sneaky athletic. He's an athletic quarterback. Like, he can run really well. And we don't really get to talk about that much because you're comparing him to like a Jaden Daniels in particular, who's amazing running. There's an opportunity for them to take Drake May, and I do think that that's what they're going to do. And if they take a receiver, they may get one at the beginning of the second round, like a Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. I can't say his name right. Adonai Mitchell. Maybe they'll get him if he falls into the second round. Like, there's going to be opportunities to get really good wide receivers at the beginning of the second round. And so I don't think that they're going to force it and take Marvin Harrison Jr. I do truly believe that they're going to go take Drake May and move on from there. Now, another story that also came out today was that they're very comfortable letting Jacoby Brissett start. And so I do think that, again, speaks to exactly who they'd be able to take. This is one of the older quarterback classes we've seen in a while where there's so many fifth-year seniors, but Drake May is not one of them. Drake May's a young pup compared to all the fifth-year seniors like Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Penix, etc. And so I do think, like, this is a perfect situation for him. You let Jacoby Brissett start, take Drake May, you let him sit for however long you need him to sit. Ideally, you let him sit for the full season, and then you go continue to fill your roster because you have pretty high-end picks everywhere else throughout the draft. So at the beginning of the rounds, I mean, so that I feel like that's a good situation, and I also feel like that's what's going to happen. New England fans, you guys are taking a quarterback, and this shouldn't be super controversial. Just take the best guy. Pray that it works out. So I think New England, so that's 1, Bears, Caleb Williams. 2, Jaden Daniels to Commanders. 3, Drake May to New England. I'm as close to saying these are locked in as I can. Now, number 4 is the one where we got to talk a little bit more about. So the Cardinals, they've said a few times, and they said it a few days ago, that they're open for business. They're willing to trade the number 4 pick. They're clearly not taking a quarterback, and they know that the market is getting hot and heavy for quarterbacks now. And so I do think that, like, there's an opportunity for certain teams to trade up. I'm more skeptical of, like, the Minnesota trading up and the teams who are not super close trading up. But one team that I do think could easily trade up would be the New York Giants. So taking a step back, who the current quarterback is Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. The Giants head coach Brian Daboll said that there's no guarantee that Daniel Jones' knee will be ready for week 1 of the 2024 season. And Jack said it a couple days ago, like, they were locked in on Jaden Daniels, and I think they're now locked in on JJ McCarthy. So I have them trading up because it's only like 2 spots, trading up from 6 to 4 to get JJ McCarthy. So that's your top 4: Caleb, Jaden, Drake, JJ. I feel like that's how it's going to go. They are just not so they're really giving up on Daniel Jones. And I say giving up, like, it's not their fault. Like, Daniel Jones has been objectively terrible. Outside of that one good year he had, he's been horrendous. And he's also been incredibly injury prone. That's really the thing that's really been getting them. But from a statistics standpoint, this last year, like, just listen to these stats from the 5 games last year. Because I feel like I didn't pay attention to this. So maybe you guys know this, but I just didn't. In 5 games that he finished, I'm not even counting the one he tore his ACL, 2 touchdowns throwing, 6 interceptions, a 36 QBR, and he was sacked 28 times. Now, the first thing you'll say is, like, he's not blocking for himself. How can you say that him getting sacked 10 times against the Seahawks is his fault? Obviously, the offensive line was trash, but he was also bad. Like, quarterback sacks A lot of that is on the quarterback, understanding protections and being able to get out of it. Like that's supposed to be part of his bread and butter, is his escapability. And he was terrible picking up protections. He really did not help his offensive line at all either. So miss me with that being 100% on the offensive line. And they actually made some improvements to the offensive line, but I don't think it's really going to benefit him. They are just upset with him, and I think they're not using the injuries as an excuse, but that seems to be the main point that they're trying to push for why they're going to try to move on from Daniel Jones. So I think it's ESPN's Jordan Rana said that Jones' injury history is what has the team contemplating moving on. I don't know if there's some contractual language that they're trying to use to get out of it, but it does seem like his time in New York is coming to an end. If he's not ready by week 1, I could easily see this scenario happening. One, I think Drew Lock's probably going to start week 1 anyway. He's on the roster. There was that discussion that the GM of the Seahawks said like Drew Lock was going to get a chance to start in New York. And even though Drew Lock denied that, I mean, they also said that Daniel Jones is their guy. So Giants seems like they're not telling the truth right now. So I'm taking that with a grain of salt. Drew Lock's likely going to start if they draft a quarterback, and if they don't. Like if they don't draft a quarterback, he's likely going to start week 1. And I wouldn't be surprised if he kept the job from Daniel Jones, just so that New York just saw what they have. And also it's not a bad strategy if you want a high pick next year to just let Drew Lock do his thing. But then if they do draft like a JJ McCarthy in particular, who's another guy who's relatively young, let him sit, man. You draft JJ McCarthy, let him sit until he can't sit anymore. I do think it'll be a lot harder of a situation in New York for JJ to sit the full season without them just chanting JJ in the stands at some point in New York. But that would be a great situation for JJ in particular if he was able to sit behind Drew Lock and just learn and just be a quarterback that learns his first year and then maybe plays the second year. Now, let's talk about all this stuff. I think that Daniel Jones' time in New York is numbered. I don't even know if he's going to play for real this year. And I definitely don't think he's starting week 1. And again, like I said, Drew Lock, he may excite the fan base enough where they just let Drew Lock run with it for a little bit and give him a full season to start, which he's not had. Now, the last time Drew Lock has played any substantial time, it was like 13 games. I believe it was clearly with Denver. It wasn't good. It wasn't great. But from a fantasy football perspective, this guy will be much better for those weapons than Daniel Jones will. And in particular, I really am just upset with the landing spot for Jalen Hyatt, but I would be so much more excited if it's going to be Drew Lock behind quarterback or behind the center versus Daniel Jones. Drew Lock, it's not that he's inaccurate down the field. He's actually pretty inaccurate, but he takes shots, man. He takes shots and he don't give an F. He's going to chuck it. In 13 games in 2020, which was the last time he played like a substantial amount of time, he was number 6 in interceptable balls, 2nd in danger plays, 5 games with more than 1 interception. Not one, more than 1 interception. And so I think like if they're going to let him get some run, I'm going to be loving Jalen Hyatt. Not like season long. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just like some DFS stuff, but I would definitely pick him up and ride the Drew Lock wave as long as possible because I do think that there's going to be some benefit there. So yeah, I think that he would be a flyer worth taking, and I do love I like Devin Singletary regardless of who the quarterback is, especially if it's like JJ McCarthy. They throw the ball a ton to the running backs at Michigan, and not that that's the same system as what Brian Daboll runs, but it clearly is something that he leans on. So I think that Devin Singletary is actually in a really good spot in fantasy, and you're getting him at amazing value at the end of your drafts. And I think that Jalen Hyatt is a really fun flyer at the end of your draft just to see why not, especially if Drew Lock starts week 1 and kind of goes off. Not that they win, but just he throws a ton. So that's what I think is happening at 4. So again, it's Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels 2, Drake May, I really think that's locked in at 3, and then JJ McCarthy seems to be the backup plan for the Giants. And I have a feeling like 6-4 is not a huge jump. That seems really reasonable for them to make that happen. Now, so that's all the draft stuff I have. Let's just talk about the rest of the NFL. And again, some of these players who've just not been talked about a lot in the news, especially as free agency has gone on. So let's jump to the Seahawks. So Seahawks head coach Mike McDaniel said that he is very confident in Geno Smith. His exact quote when asked about a quarterback competition since they just recently acquired Sam Howell, this is what he said. Do you expect there to be a QB competition? Tom Pelissero asked. He said, I don't. I've talked to Gino about it. Very confident in Gino. Gino's going to be our starter. Sam knows he's going to be our backup, but Sam is a great young player. He's got a really bright future that we believe in. So he's definitely just cleaning up comments he made in the past where he was not firm about Gino. Same thing with the general manager. They were both not firm at all about Gino's starting position there. And so I do think that they're just trying to clean some things up. I wouldn't be surprised, or I actually would be surprised if Sam Howell didn't start a game this year. But let's just say like Gino starts the season. Based on the system he's going into, I actually expect him to have a bounce back year. Now, this past year, he really struggled. He was under pressure a ton because his tackles got banged up very early, 10 less touchdowns than he did last year. His accuracy numbers came down, yada, yada, not as great. But with the new offensive coordinator coming from Washington, Grubbs, who was on the staff with obviously like Michael Penix last year, the vertical passing game is really what they accentuate in this offense. And I do think that if there is a skill set that really fits that well, it is Gino. Gino has a really strong arm. He's accurate down the field. This system is a perfect match for Geno Smith. And so unless Gino, maybe he just continues to turn into a pumpkin and that 1 year, a year ago was just an outlier, I think he'll probably keep his job unless he's hurt. And I do think one of the players who, again, like we're just not talking about him as much because it's not as fun and as sexy to talk about, but we all want to talk about JSN, and I'm a big JSN fan, but we have to stop disrespecting DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf in this system is set up for uber success. No matter who's on the field, he's always in the top 10 in the NFL in red zone targets. And last year he was number 6. He was also number 6, I believe. He was number 6 in air yards. And now you're going to this vertical passing offense with Grubbs and Geno Smith, where that is where his bread is buttered. We could be looking at a top 12 year for DK, if not higher, especially in like standard leagues, because I think the touchdowns, they could definitely be there. And if you just know, I mean, you saw what Roma Dunze did in this system last year. DK Metcalf is that on steroids, not literally, but he is that type of play. Like he is a big play threat all the time. He's always in the red zone. Like he's always has a chance to score. Like I think that DK Metcalf, I've been asleep on DK. I'll admit that I've been asleep on DK. I don't own him in a lot of leagues, but maybe this is just a message for me. Like I got to wake up. So I do think that Geno has a bounce back year, and DK Metcalf could definitely be in the top 12 for sure. All right, so that's one. Another really under discussed player I gotta say is Gus Edwards. There was so much running back free agency news that no one really wants to talk about Gus Edwards, but I gotta give him at least a couple minutes really quick. So the Chargers GM Joe Hortiz called Gus Edwards the bell cow back. So he said he's the bell cow, the goal line guy, the finisher. The right mentality for what we're looking to do here. I told you we wanted to be bigger, play physical style of football on both sides of the ball, and he helps us do that. And I initially, when I heard this news, I was like, okay, Gus Edwards is just going to be a placeholder, and they're clearly going to be drafting someone. But I've gotten a little bit less like confident in the fact that they're going to draft like a high level running back to take his job. But here's the reason why. So I think they just mean what they say. Like this guy fits Jim Harbaugh's system to a T. He is going to run into the line and he's going to get those dirty yards. And he every now and then is going to break open, like not a 50-yard run, but like a 20-yard run. He's really solid and he's super efficient. Last year, his efficiency took a dip, but we have to remember that he was coming off of an ACL tear the year prior. Usually the rule of thumb is it takes you a year to get back from an ACL, and then it takes you another year to be the guy you previously were. So technically in 2023, we should be seeing like 2021-ish or so Gus Edwards, where he was hitting us with 5 yards per carry on a clip. So I do think that there's some opportunity there. He also in the Ravens, I mean, they obviously ran the ball like crazy. But he also saw the second or the most, it was the second most stacked boxes, second most defenders in the box whenever he was running. That is just not going to be the case. And I know you got Lamar Jackson, so you gotta account for him, and that's going to help a running back out. But the fact that they were just packing in the box whenever he was in the game, while you could say that's going to happen here, I do think that Justin Herbert's arm is more of a threat than Lamar Jackson's arm, no matter what receivers they just jettison. So I do think that he's going to have a little bit more of an efficient year for those reasons. And then you got to just consider, like, I know he never catches any passes. He literally caught 13, or he didn't even catch 13 passes. He got 13 targets in 17 games. That number is so ridiculously low that almost has to improve just based on statistics. Like, there's just a natural regression. It has to be higher than that if you're running in a different system, even if it's going to be a pretty run heavy system. Because in San Francisco, they do pass the ball to their running backs. That's definitely a thing they do. And so, yeah, if they do not bring in a rookie, there's a good possibility that he is a bell cow back. And I don't think he's going to be the pass catching back per se, but he'll catch a few more balls than he traditionally does. And he's always going to have that touchdown opportunity. Now, that's what I think is going to happen if they don't draft a rookie. And even though they have not had any substantial like pre-draft visits with the rookie so far, running back wise, I still think they're drafting a rookie. It's just what Jim Harbaugh does. He drafted a rookie when he was a coach of San Francisco every single year, and they were a rookie in like the 2nd to 4th round of the NFL draft. So they weren't like quote unquote scrubs. Now they did a terrible job drafting those rookies. Like they just were not. There was like LaMichael James, Marshawn Lattimore. Was that his name? It was a Marshawn Lattimore, like for South Carolina though. It was a different guy. Kendall Hunter. Like not super stellar Hall of Famers here. Not Carlson Hyde. Hyde from Ohio State. He was probably the best pick, you could say, and he was a 2nd round pick. So it's very possible in this draft that they pick up a running back. One, hopefully that they just don't pick a bust. And 2, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a running back that complements Gus Edwards. Like I don't think it would be a Gus Edwards clone. Would it surprise me if they went and got like one of the more pass catching style running backs to complement Gus Edwards? No. But I just feel like even if they draft somebody, 1, they could bust. 2, they may be a pass catching back. So we do need to put a little bit more respect on Gus Edwards' name because there's a possibility, especially in standard leagues, that he's a top 25 running back. So that's it on Gus. Next, so the NFL, they decided that they will not be banning the tush push this upcoming NFL season. And so the NFL is leaving the tush push as a legal play for 2024. And really the reason why this was brought up is because teams were complaining about the Eagles running the play, but the NFL decided not to change it just because like teams are complaining that they were running it well. And just because the Eagles run it well and the other teams can't, that's why they decided like they're not going to ban it. It's not like it's an illegal play. There's not some other advantage that you're getting from this play. There is just one team who's just very good at doing it. And so they decided just not to punish the Eagles for that. And while this may not seem like the biggest fantasy story, this is a massive deal for Jalen Hurts. Like nearly 30% of his production in fantasy comes from the tush push. Like comes from touchdowns that are like 2 yards or less from the goal line. And so you like him not having a tush push would have been a massive hit to his fantasy value. Now I do think they definitely need to like reduce the amount of times they do it because this guy is not going to stay healthy for a full season. And we all know that Jason Kelce retired and he is one of the most athletic centers we've probably ever seen. Definitely one of the most athletic today. And even though they're going to be replacing him with a guy they've drafted, like it's solid. Like I'm sure he's going to be fine at it, but the leverage that Kelce gets, the athleticism that he has is unparalleled. So they will not be as effective on it. So that's why I definitely have to tick down Jalen Hurts a little bit just based on those factors. But at the very least, he's still going to be like a top 4, top 5 quarterback just because that big play and that big part of his fantasy portfolio is still going to be available. So that's at least good news. All right. Next story. So this is left. Sorry, guys. The microphone just fell. There it goes. Don't let that happen again. All right. So the next story. So Jerry Sneed, he agreed on a deal with the Titans. You can see over my shoulder here. I'm not happy about it. So like the Colts, they were not as into the deal or as into the trade as I may have thought. Because we had reported on this last week that both the Titans and the Colts were looking to get L'Jarius Sneed. But then it really came out during the week that the Colts were really slow-footing this thing. They were not really in the mix like that, and the Titans were being very aggressive to go get him. So Titans ended up getting him. He's going to now be playing on the opposite side of Chidobe Awuzie, and their defense looks pretty decent now. Like they lost some linebackers, but they got Jeffrey Simmons, who was tweeting about this. They got Harold Landry still. They got these guys in the defensive backfield. Safeties are okay. Like they're definitely improving. And I feel like this is like an interesting time to talk about like what the Titans are doing. They're investing in the team as it's currently constructed, and they're putting some dollars on this team in hopes of like getting Will Levis cooking. I think that them investing in the defense so heavily, them investing in offensive weapons like Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley for a huge deal, really shows their belief that they got a guy in Will Levis. I don't believe they have a guy. And I think some of his issues, they haven't fixed those things, but it shows that the Titans are really investing heavily and wanting him to be their dude. So I think he's a nice upside player in fantasy. I would not mind taking a flyer on him at the end of my drafts, especially in like the deeper leagues, because would not surprise me if week 1, whoever they play, he has a good game. And you would have wished you just kept him on your bench. Like he's one of those like high-end stashes, and you just see what happens. Maybe he proves me wrong and just turns into a great quarterback, because now he has like 3 legit receivers, a tight end who I'm still a huge fan of, and Chig. Like they have some dudes there. The biggest concern I have for this team is the offensive line. They were terrible last year. They made some modest improvements, but nothing that makes me like scream like, oh my gosh, they've really fixed all their issues. And for a quarterback who really pocket presence, you see him get blasted. Like he sometimes has no feel for the pressure around him. They need to fix that part. So free agency is still an opportunity. They obviously they can draft somebody. They could draft one of these amazing tackles and throw him on the left side. So then maybe not as big of an issue as I'm making it out to be, but it's something that you got to consider. But still high upside play, so I don't mind them. It's high upside, low cost. You throw the type of guy on your bench. And then the last thing before we get out of here, I don't want to go too long. Let's see. Just a few like little updates. So Odell Beckham, he had a really good visit with the Dolphins. I wouldn't be surprised if he signs there. There's not a huge amount of fantasy impact there. I guess it's kind of hurts Hill and Waddle, but not for real. I mean, they're adding like more weapons that are going to dictate more targets than normal. So they added Jonnu Smith. They may be adding Odell Beckham. And so I don't love that, because one of the biggest benefits to the Dolphins is target consolidation, but I'm not like panicking about it. I still think Tyreek Hill is like a top 3, top 4 pick. Jalen Waddle, I expect him to bounce back from last year. And I just wouldn't be surprised if they're still amazing, but it's something to consider. I also think Odell, like it definitely seems like a lifestyle move that he would want to make for sure. Next one. So Josh Reynolds is actually visiting the Ravens. And so he's going to be visiting them this week. I think that would be a great move. I think that would be a significant upgrade from what they saw from Odell last year. Not that Josh Reynolds is some world beater, but he just does everything right. He runs the right routes. He catches the ball. He's a red zone target. He is just a good player for an offense. And I think Lamar Jackson and even Zay Flowers could benefit from learning like from a vet like that. And so I do think Josh Reynolds would be a good fit. But to me, almost the bigger impact of that Josh Reynolds story and the fact that he's even a free agent is about what are the Lions doing. Josh Reynolds is a big part of that team. Josh Reynolds is the only reliable outside target that they have. I'll continue to wait to see what hell happens with J-Mo. Like I don't see that coming in to fruition, but maybe I'll just be completely wrong. So if J-Mo doesn't turn into what we hoped for, it's Amon-Ra, it's Laporta, it's Gibbs. And a team who is already super consolidated in their target share is going to be even more consolidated. Now, this is an amazing, amazing draft this year, and this is a great opportunity to add a receiver on the outside. But I will say they have a lot of other holes that I would definitely try to plug up, especially in the defensive backfield. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go that route in the draft. But, I mean, they obviously have multiple picks. They could pick whoever they want. This type of news, though, makes me feel much more confident in Amon-Ra, makes me feel much more confident in the reception upsides we're going to see in Gibbs this year. And it makes me much more confident in Sam Laporta. Like right now, I'm debating between Sam Laporta and Trey McBride as my tight end 1. But this really does help the case because I do worry about any additional targets on that team taking away from his upside as the number 1 tight end. So that's at least good to know. And there's always a possibility that Reynolds resigns, but if he doesn't, that trio in Detroit, I'm going to feel really confident about them. And that's all today. I'm not going to just continue to talk about these other random stories. It's the doldrums of the offseason. You guys, make sure you guys give us a follow on YouTube. Give us a follow on the main Player Profiler page on YouTube, as well as the Player Profiler News. We go live every single day. This is a pre-recorded one, but typically I go live every Sunday at 7. You could also catch me personally on TikTok. I'm there all the time on Player Profiler, as well as on my personal page, FF Strategist. So make sure you guys check us out. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week, or see you tomorrow. Peace out.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.